In a bustling neighborhood, an elderly black man living alone, known for always cooking for his neighbors, led a quiet but warm life. One stormy night, he opened his door to a 10-year-old white girl, shivering and bruised, running from an abusive stepmother. He didn't ask questions. He just brought her in, fed her, protected her, and called the police. Years later, that same girl, now a federal judge, returned to repay him and asked to call him Dad. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. In the forgotten corner of a Boston suburb, where Victorian homes stood like sentinels and maple trees cast long shadows over cobblestone streets, there stood a distinguished house at the end of Sycamore Lane. It wasn't ostentatious, but it possessed something no real estate listing could capture: a heartbeat. The walls had absorbed decades of jazz music, hearty laughter, and the rich aroma of freshly baked cornbread. This was the home of Papa Winston. Papa Winston wasn't celebrated in newspapers. He displayed no prestigious certificates on his walls or drove anything more impressive than his reliable old Buick that protested on winter mornings, but everyone on Sycamore Lane knew him. Some called him the neighborhood guardian. Others simply called him Papa. He had a presence that made you feel instantly at ease. Papa Winston was 68 years old, though he'd dismiss any mention of his age with a wave of his hand. Time was something he carried, not as a burden, but like an old leather-bound book, worn at the edges, but still valuable. He lived alone by peaceful choice. His wife had departed 15 years ago, and his children were scattered across the country. But Papa Winston never allowed solitude to find permanent residence in his home. His dining table was always arranged for company. That day had unfolded like countless others. A copper-tinted light bathed his garden, where tomatoes climbed trellises and collard greens reached skyward. He hummed a Coltrane melody as he stirred a pot of gumbo, rich and aromatic. The vintage record player spun in the corner, half playing Miles Davis, half crackling, but he preferred it that way. He moved with deliberate care now. Age had claimed its portion, but his spirit remained vibrant. It was the kind of evening where urgency seemed foreign. Children hurried home on scooters, porch lights began their nightly vigil, and somewhere a cat meowed once before falling silent. Papa Winston had just removed a tray of cornbread from the oven when he heard it, a whisper of a knock. He paused. Visitors rarely came at this hour. He wiped his hands on his apron, his heart alert, the kind of alertness that only men like Papa Winston understood. Those who'd witnessed enough to know that sometimes danger didn't announce itself loudly. He opened the door, and everything shifted. Standing there was a girl, no more than 10, drenched from the downpour, arms wrapped tightly around herself, trembling not just from cold, but from something deeper. Her pale skin was marred with bruises, one eye slightly swollen, the kind of injury not sustained from code playground accidents. Her lips were cracked, her clothes inadequate for the evening chill. But what devastated him most was how she regarded him, not with terror, but with exhaustion, like someone who had fled too far for too long. She said little, just 4 words. "Please don't make me go." And Papa Winston, without hesitation, extended his hand, not with interrogation, but with certainty. He welcomed her in, closed the door, and just like that, a new chapter commenced. Not just for the girl, but for the 68-year-old man who had always believed that the front door was never intended to be a barrier, but a bridge. Inside Papa Winston's kitchen, the warm golden light seemed to embrace the girl. The aroma of cornbread and gumbo permeated the air, anchoring the moment with a sense of sanctuary. She remained in the entryway, creating a small puddle on the polished hardwood, arms still crossed, eyes scanning corners as if expecting danger. Papa Winston didn't rush her. At 68, he understood the value of silence. He simply turned toward the stove, retrieved a clean kitchen towel, and placed it gently on the table before ladling gumbo into a deep ceramic bowl. "I made this with okra from the garden," he said softly, not looking directly at her. "It's hearty, but gentle on the soul." He set down the bowl, added a thick slice of cornbread, and stepped back. The girl didn't move initially, then cautiously approached the table. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the spoon. The first taste came hesitantly, but the second followed more quickly. She remained silent, but her body spoke volumes. The relaxing of her shoulders, the steadying of her breathing, the flicker of disbelief that someone had prepared something specifically for her. Papa Winston observed from the sink, eyes never leaving her. The bruises on her arm revealed more than words could express. When she finished, she looked up at him for the first time, and in her eyes, he saw the question she was too frightened to voice. "Am I safe here?" He nodded as if answering a prayer. "You have a name, little one?" His voice was gentle but steady. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Lily." It emerged hoarsely, as if she hadn't used it recently. Papa Winston repeated it as if it were sacred. "Lily?" he said, smiling gently. "That's a beautiful name, bright like morning light." She nodded once, eyes lowering, voice barely audible. "Please don't call anyone. I'll be good. I can't go back." And there it was, the plea beneath the silence, the terror wrapped in obedience. Papa Winston stepped forward slowly, reached into the cabinet, and retrieved a faded quilt. He draped it over her shoulders with care that made her flinch, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. "I'm not sending you back, child," he said calmly. "Not tonight, not ever, to harm. But I do need to contact someone who can help you properly. You're safe here until then." Her lip quivered, and a tear escaped down her cheek. Papa Winston gently cupped her cheek, his thumb wiping away the tear with reverence. He left her at the table and moved to call the police, requesting that an officer trained in child welfare respond without uniforms or flashing lights. By the time he returned, Lily was curled on his sofa, wrapped in the quilt, the empty bowl placed carefully on the coffee table. She was already drifting into sleep, the kind of rest that only follows prolonged fear. Papa Winston sat beside her, wordless, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder, his presence a silent promise. He recognized the system's imperfections, but until morning arrived, he would hold the night like a shield around this girl. At dawn, when light filtered through the curtains, he heard the knock. A man stood there, Mr. Sullivan, a caseworker with the Department of Children and Family Services. He spoke in hushed tones, and Papa Winston appreciated that. Lily remained asleep on the sofa. They sat in the kitchen, sharing difficult truths. Papa Winston described the bruises, the fear in the girl's eyes, the way she recoiled at kindness. Mr. Sullivan nodded slowly, making notes. "She's fled before," he murmured, "but this time someone actually opened the door." When the time came to wake her, Papa Winston did it himself. He sat beside her and whispered her name. She stirred, eyes opening with panic, but then she saw him, just him, and the fear subsided. "Lily, child," he said softly, "there's a gentleman here who wants to help. We need to discuss what happens next." She sat up slowly, arms wrapped around her knees. "Do I have to leave?" The question wasn't posed with defiance. It was quiet, resigned. Papa Winston took her small hand in his. "Not right now, and not to where you came from. That will never happen again." Mr. Sullivan knelt beside them. "Lily, we're going to find a safe place for you, a foster home, where you'll be properly cared for. But for the next few days, if it's acceptable to Mr. Winston, you can remain right here while we process the details." Papa Winston nodded decisively. "She has a room ready," he said, though he hadn't prepared it in years. It had once belonged to his granddaughter. "And I have provisions, enough for a week. I don't require any assistance, just assurance she's not returning to danger." Lily blinked, hope flickering in her eyes. Papa Winston guided her to the spare room with its soft blue walls and told her she could unpack her heart here, one fragment at a time. Later that morning, he took her shopping for necessities, socks without holes, a toothbrush, and a second-hand purple jacket she selected with a faint smile. But Papa Winston noticed. He observed everything. Over the subsequent days, she thawed. She experienced nightmares, tensed when people moved quickly, and sometimes forgot to speak. But each time she fractured, Papa Winston was there to hold the pieces. He taught her how to make cornbread, how to tend seedlings, and how to predict weather by observing birds. In return, she began to trust the way she'd arrange his medications without prompting or rest her head against his arm during jazz hour on Saturday evenings. When Mr. Sullivan returned with news of a foster placement, Lily's hands trembled as she packed. Clothes, a book Papa Winston gave her, and the journal he tucked under her pillow. On the first page, he had written, "You are valued, you are protected, you are extraordinary." She stood by the door, backpack over one shoulder. "Will I see you again?" she asked, and Papa Winston cupped her cheek. "You will, child. I'll be right here when you're ready. This door doesn't close on people who need compassion." She nodded and followed Mr. Sullivan down the walkway. Papa Winston watched them disappear, his hand resting on the open door. The days following Lily's departure stretched long. Papa Winston resumed his routines, but the quiet within his home had altered. Now the silence echoed with memories. Footsteps across hardwood floors, silverware touching a bowl, a girl attempting to read aloud. Meanwhile, Lily's journey continued through uncertainty. The foster home was secure, but nothing tasted like Papa Winston's gumbo, and no one pronounced her name with his gentleness. School presented challenges. She was withdrawn, frequently isolated. Other children mocked her quietness. She read his words every morning, fingers tracing the ink. "You are valued. You are protected. You are extraordinary." That page became her compass. In middle school, she joined debate team, discovering that words could be armor. In high school, she won competitions and graduated as valedictorian with a scholarship. She entered college, determined to build something significant. Years passed. Lily proceeded to law school, clerking under distinguished judges, volunteering for children's advocacy, carrying the sacred duty of protection. She still had no parents of record, but she carried Papa Winston's words like inheritance. For Papa Winston, life decelerated with dignity. His hands became more rigid, his movements more measured, but his spirit never diminished. Children still knocked on his door for treats. Teenagers still sought his counsel. He never once secured his door. He never once stopped believing that one act of mercy could alter a person's entire trajectory. One autumn morning, Papa Winston sat at his kitchen table, organizing correspondence. One envelope captured his attention. Thick ivory, colored with no return address, just his name in elegant handwriting. Inside was a single sheet. Embossed in deep maroon ink were the words, "United States District Court." Below that, a letter brief but profound. "Dearest Papa Winston, tomorrow I am being sworn in as a federal judge. There will be cameras, journalists, speeches. I wanted you to have these words first, because none of that, the title, the robe, the law, is mine without you. You saw me when I was invisible. You nourished me when I was starving for more than food. You gave me a name worth answering to. You are the reason I stand where I do, not as a survivor, but as a woman who belongs. Tomorrow, when they ask who helped build me, I will say your name aloud. I love you, Papa. Always have, always will. Your daughter, Lily." The letter trembled in his hand. His eyes, moist with memory, drifted to the window. His heart was full in a way that left no space for regret. He had always believed in the small things. Warm meals, attentive ears, a place to rest your spirit. And now, one of those small things had grown into something mighty. The broadcast aired nationally. Papa Winston's neighbor's daughter brought her laptop. "You need to see this, Mr. Winston," she said, smiling. He sat upright as the screen showed the seal of the United States District Court. Then Lily appeared, elegant in her black robe, voice steady as a river. Her speech began with acknowledgments, but then she told them about him, about a night when a broken girl knocked on a stranger's door and was met with gumbo and silence and love. She told them his name, Winston Taylor, Papa Winston to everyone, the man who didn't save my life once. He saved it every day after by reminding me that I mattered. The camera captured murmurs in the audience, some blinking back tears. Lily continued, "We speak of justice as if it's an institution, but for me, justice began with a 68-year-old man's hand holding mine. He taught me what dignity resembled, what mercy sounded like, and what it meant to belong." The next morning, a car pulled into his driveway. The door opened, and there she was, taller, more poised, but still Lily, still his. He opened the front door before she knocked. She ascended the steps, wrapped her arms around his fragile frame, and held on. "I came home," she murmured. "I'm not here to visit, Papa. I'm here to stay. I want to care for you now." And just like that, the door that had once opened to save a girl now welcomed home a woman who had kept her promise, who had never forgotten the hand that fed her, not just food, but hope. And Papa Winston leaned into her embrace and whispered, "Took you long enough, child. One evening, Lily found him resting in his armchair. She sat beside him, took his hand, feeling how fragile he'd become, how time had thinned his skin, but never his spirit. "Papa," she said, "I want to make it official. I want you to be my father, not just in my heart, in name, in everything." His eyes shimmered with recognition, gratitude, a love so old it didn't need words. "You always were my daughter," he whispered, "from the moment you knocked." That night, under the same roof where their story began, Lily filed the paperwork that would make it true on paper, what had long been true in spirit. She signed his name with reverence. Winston Taylor, now her father by choice. From that moment forward, she called him Papa, with no hesitation, no explanation, just truth. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.